And we're alive.
All right.
Hello, everybody. So we thought we'd start off by just a quick introduction. My name is Tyler Whitesides, and I kind of got my career. My first book came out in 2011, but I got my start with children's books, actually, middle grade fantasy. So kind of that 8 years old to 12-year-old range. But ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to write like big epic fantasy. It was always the dream, like as a teenager, and finally kind of set about on what I thought was going to be just a little side project that I was going to work on here and there, and ended up writing an entire novel. And now here we are. And so the first book is The Thousand Deaths of Arder Ben. Yeah, just a little short one here. And then the second book, The Shattered Realm of Arder Ben. And then today is a pretty exciting day. The third and final book in the Kingdom of Grit trilogy, The Last Lies of Arder Ben, is out today. So that's a little bit about me. And so I'm kind of new to the epic fantasy genre as a writer. This is my first trilogy, but the guy next to me here, he's old hat with this. So David, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about it?
Okay, so I've also been going since about 2010. I had a significantly different start. I was working at Pizza Hut as a delivery driver for pretty much most of my life, and that was what I was getting used to my math degree doing. And the whole time I was just kind of writing this fantasy series that was so stereotypical orcs and elves and magic, and everything that I was reading was not something you were ever going to sell to an agent. And eventually, like, we got a Kindle. I was like, this thing is great. And then I found out I could self-publish on that Kindle. I was like, screw it. No one's ever going to buy this stupid half-orc series anyway. So mad dashed out. Like, I had I think 400,000 words written in it at that point. Mad dashed it out, self-published it. And turns out people did want to read it. And then that led to, I've self-published the half-orc series, the Shadow Dance series, which was picked up by Orbit. I have self-published the 4 Paladins books. I'm author of the Breaking World series, co-authored with Rob Dupere with 47 North, and then the Seraphim trilogy with Orbit, the current fun trilogy with the Keepers with Orbit, and then the just announced coming out probably 2022 Vagrant Gods trilogy as well. So been going at this for 10 years, wildly better than I ever could have imagined, and hoping to keep getting to do that and not get thrown onto the street. So that's me.
Nice, David. Looks like we got a couple of questions coming in already. So thank you for those of you that are throwing some questions out. Feel free to keep them rolling here over the next little while. What is the first book about? What did you take for the first book? So in my series, The Thousand Deaths, in a brief pitch, The Thousand Deaths of Arder Ben is basically, it's about a con man who is hired by a priest to steal the king's crown and then feed it to a dragon. And that kind of sets the tone. It's a heist fantasy. And so it's the whole assemble the team, right? And maybe this would be a good segue into here why David and I are doing this event together. Here on the cover of my book, you will find a very kind blurb by David Dalglish, and he's at a Mission Impossible, but with magic, dragons, and a series of heists that go from stealing a crown to saving the world. So, David, I don't know if I've ever had a chance in person to thank you for your nice words, but thanks for reading my book and throwing a blurb on there.
Most welcome. I was just, anytime I write a blurb, I'm like, hey, I love this book. How do I say it's good without sounding like silly or weird? I was like, because it just I read this book and it's Mission Impossible with dragons. Can I say it's Mission Impossible with dragons? Is that allowed? Is that against the rules? They're like, no, it's great. I'm like, oh, well, there's your blurb now.
Perfect. David, do you want to tell us about one of your...
I guess the question is which first book? I guess if we
pick one series, maybe.
I guess we'll go with this one. This would probably make the most sense to talk about. With Soulkeeper, the idea I wanted to do is a lot of books and media I've been reading and watching, we're dealing with a lot of the magic returning to the world. I mean, Game of Thrones obviously was like the big premier one at the time, but a lot of other books like magic used to exist, but it's coming back, but it's always dripped in slowly and people are uncovering things and it builds. And I wanted the idea of what if just all of it happened in a single day? Like all the magical creatures, all the monsters, the various races, the spells, all the discredited little spell scrolls started working and all the weird potions suddenly did things, and like all the creatures that supposedly existed in the woods are there and eating people, and just all at once, and tried to kind of get into the absolute chaos and confusion that would create in a world in such a catastrophic, world-changing day. So that was the idea for the series, kind of growing from that.
That's great. I was seeing here, let's jump down and answer. I saw a question from Lois Young, who I saw earlier has to run to class. So let's answer that one, then we can bump back up and answer Nicole's question here. The question here, both your series have concluded. What are your next projects? David, you want to start on
that? Sure. We just recently got to announce, after sitting on it, the Vagrant Gods trilogy, starting with The Bladed Faith is the first book. And it's the idea of there's both series, a continent and then a bunch of surrounding islands, and they all have their own gods that are physically manifested and are on that in these various nations. And an empire basically shows up, invading the main character's island, kills their gods, and just completely conquers them. And it's about like a rebellion against this overwhelming empire and their god emperor that's basically trying to conquer everything and basically enforce religious fervor in his name only.
Very cool. And you said that's the one coming out maybe 2022?
2022, assuming it's if this schedule we've been publishing a book a year by me around the same time in February or January, so assuming that doesn't change, Voidbreaker should be coming out to end The Keepers in February, and then I'm assuming next year in 2022 will be Bladed Faith, assuming everything goes well, nothing goes wrong, and my editor doesn't look at the rough draft I'm sending her in a week and go, nope, and makes me write half of it. So,
right on. In case you missed it, David, while you were talking, we got a comment in that said, "Can't wait for David to kill more of my favorite characters."
How you doing?
Do you do that, David?
I've never actually. I know this guy. He's a streamer that I've chatted with a bunch on Twitch and Twitter. Right, so how you doing, man?
That's funny. So next for me, I have a book coming out in January. It's one of my kids' books. It's called Magic's Most Wanted. It's with HarperCollins, and it's about basically like a 12-year-old kid who accidentally commits a magical crime. But he didn't even know magic was real. And then all of a sudden the magic police are after him, and there's a magic bounty hunter after him, and he's on the run. And anyway, it's a bit of a mystery, like a magic mystery. A junior detective springs him from jail, and the two of them go on the run trying to piece together clues of who framed him for a magical crime. So that's coming out in January. And like I said, my kids' stuff is usually geared for like 8 to 12-year-olds. And so that's kind of the...
Your magic police would be very different from my magic police.
Yes, exactly. That's what I think. Yeah. Okay. I see this question in from Nicole. Looks like a fun one here. Are there any funny or random moments in your life that inspired some parts of your books?
Yes, some of them I should probably not admit. I think the most common thing, and I know I'm not the only one that does this, cameos from people we know are incredibly common, including fellow editors, fellow authors. Most end up in horrible, violent deaths, which is usually a badge of honor. So I know every editor of mine has suffered some horrible fate. I've stuck, especially when I was self-publishing, I didn't give a crap in the slightest. I would just throw a fellow self-published authors I knew and like, hey, how you doing? You die in chapter 12. It's horrific. You want to read it? So other than that, I tried to only make it a flattery and not a, oh my gosh, this person's driving me insane, time to dump them in a pit of acid somewhere. So but that's
fair. My childhood friend, best childhood friend, gets bitten in half by a dragon. So, in book 1 of Arterben. So it's killing your friends in a novel is an act of friendship.
I'm glad to
and
know.
Honor, right, David?
It's everyone's usually very excited to find out, and then they also want to know, how does it happen? How do I die?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's great. I killed you through this crazy creative way, because when you're deep in editing and writing, you need names for these freaking characters, and it's a great way.
Well, and I don't know if you do this, but I like to take my friends' names and then just like tweak like one or two vowels in the name so they sound a little more like less mainstream,
less fantasy.
It sounds a little more fantasy. And anyway, then anyone who knows that person sees that the name is very, very derived from them, but otherwise, right, plausible deniability. I kill my friends
just in case.
I was thinking too. There are a lot of, I don't know. I tend to throw in little funny moments and funny things, funny phrases. I think I don't know. I think it's in book 3 of Arderben. My grandpa used to say something like, "If you're not the lead dog, the view is all the same." Right. Mm-hmm. And so I'll throw in like little sayings or quotes that that I think are fun from funny moments or stuff my grandpa used to say.
Do you throw in song lyrics too? I'm terribly guilty of that.
I think I'm sure that I've thrown in some Hamilton lyrics.
I'm sure, like my Half-Orc series in particular is just loaded with Tool lyrics, because I was listening to that like nonstop during that 400,000 word barrage, and I'm like tweaking them just enough to be like, this won't get me sued, right? Let's just change a word. Maybe no one will notice. The 3 main families in Shadow Dance are the last names or first names are Maynard, James, and Keenan. I mean, I'm not subtle most of the time.
Right on.
So
cool. Looks like we're gonna have another question here. What drew you to epic fantasy, and what are your favorite fantasy books or stories that have inspired your work?
You want to take that one, or you want me?
Yeah, I'll dive in.
Okay.
So my relationship with epic fantasy was it really like I grew up on Terry Brooks, and I remember just watching my older siblings reading the Shannara series. And I remember I was probably like 9 or 10, and I would go to my sister and be like, "Can I borrow that book? I think I want to read it." And she'd say, let's wait until you're a little older just for the comprehension of the plot. And I remember I was like 12, and she like handed it over. She's like, it's time, brother.
You are ready.
You have, Padawan. And so I took it and I just devoured Terry Brooks and loved it. And then as an adult in more recent years, I discovered Brandon Sanderson and really loved his pacing and his dialogue. And in a way, I found it similar to the way that I would write middle grade, just really quippy, really fast, a lot of banter and things between characters. And so I feel like, I don't know, and also Sanderson's whole concept of his magic systems and the brilliance there in the scientific way that he breaks that down has been very influential in my magic system.
It's about as high a compliment as you can get when you're like, "Oh, this is a very Sanderson-esque magic system." You're like, "Thanks."
Yeah, exactly. That's like the highest praise. So for me, Terry Brooks, as a teen, just like got me hooked on the genre of epic fantasy. And then Sanderson really innovated the genre in my mind, and kind of showed me, new magic systems and new ways that you could deal with things. But it is kind of funny. While we're on magic system, then I'll let David answer the question. I was going to say that with magic systems, mine is actually based on an idea that I had when I was about 17 years old. I had just I was writing this story, and I had this throwaway line in there about these people that were harvesting stone that had been hardened from dragon dung because it had explosive property. And it was literally 2-sentence thing that I threw in when I was a teenager. I thought I was like, that's cool. And then I sat on it and I remembered it. And then 20 years later, I was like, it's time for that. It's time for that to come back.
The amount of stuff in my novels that are from D&D campaigns I attempted to write when I was like 15
Yeah,
is off the charts.
that's so cool.
Which gives a trick idea of where I got my start. I actually I wasn't too big into fantasy novels when I was a kid because I didn't really wasn't that much I had access to. My reading library was basically what our little small town library or the school had. So I grew up reading like Crichton and Clancy and Grisham and stuff like that. The really popular stuff that the library would get. I read Lord of the Rings because obviously every library had that. When I was about 14, a friend of my older brother was like a huge D&D nerd, just had every book imaginable, and was like trying to get us to play. And he loaned me a copy of the Dark Elf Trilogy by Ari Salvatore. And I devoured it. I read like book 2 in a day after finishing the first one and was like reading all of it. And I was like, I need more. He's like, okay, well, I have some good news for you. And then I couldn't get those copies. So I was like surviving off of his. And like anytime he would get another, I'd be like pleading with him, like, so I can get the next one. You're done with it, right? I can get the next one. And pretty much that got me into that just over the top, super action oriented sword and sorcery, magic and explosions everywhere. And that's pretty much influenced me to this day. And I just tons of D&D, tons of telling stories through that nature. I have so much gaming, I've played the Icewind Dale games and Baldur's Gate and every Neverwinter Nights and all of these things, World of Warcraft. It's all influenced me to the point to where some of it's embarrassing when I look back on it. But like, yes, I do have healing potions in my early Half-Orcs novels. Why do you ask? So that's very much what got me into it. And then I burned out a little bit of it for a few years. And then when I got my Kindle, I started kind of like, well, what's out there? And like one of the very first things I got on the Kindle was Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks. I was like, oh, this is pretty good. And then I got like Game of Thrones. I was like, oh, this is pretty good. This is really different from that D&D fantasy I read. And then just kind of the two melded together into what is now currently my style.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. Okay, we got another one here. Be honest, is it fun to kill some of your characters? David, you want to go? Yeah.
It depends, like what character they are. I just finished I released earlier this year the 8th. Yeah, the 8th Half-Orc novel, and I killed off I think 6 characters that had been in at least 4 books, some that had been in 5 or 6. So is it fun? No. Not like I'm writing it having a ball. Killing villains sometimes I am like, oh, this is this guy's getting what's coming to him. But no, usually the emotions I want the reader to feel are usually what I myself am feeling while writing it. So if I want you to be devastated, I'm usually holding back tears as I'm trying to get into the mentality of all the other characters grieving this loss and whatnot. After it's done, yes, I will sometimes get sick joy of other people suffering, because if I had to sit through the misery of this character dying, I'm going to enjoy your misery because I am a sadistic author and this is how we function. So,
yeah, I feel like there's a character I kill off in book 1 of Arderben, and that death was that's my favorite chapter in the book, probably. Mm-hmm. And it's not because it was fun, but it was just it's unexpected, and it happens in a way that you're just kind of what, and so there is a level of, I don't know, satisfaction to it, maybe. I don't know. About knowing that you did it well, maybe?
Yeah.
Hoping that you did it well.
I want my readers to be wrapped up in the story. I want to take them on the ride, and I want them to feel something.
Yes.
I want them to be entertained, and if I'm succeeding, be it with horror or joy or excitement, I mean, as long as I'm doing my job. So if I made someone devastated by a loss that was supposed to be devastating, then I feel good.
Yeah. And what was I going to say? Oh, let's go to the next question. I forget. Oh, thank you for that question. It is kind of fun. Oh, I did have some friends that had read an early copy of one of my other books, and they were like, "Why everyone dies? Why does this person die?" And I was like, "Well, you have to stop the characters when you're writing a trilogy. You can't have them snowball. You can't if every good character lived through, you'd have so many characters to manage at the end of the trilogy that you'd,
Yeah.
you know,
As someone who just wrote book 8, yes, yeah, it's exhausting. You're like, I'm going to try and give everyone a point of view chapter. Oh, I've got like 12 main characters. I've written a third of the book after giving everyone one point of view chapter. Yeah. This is too many.
When I was writing my middle grade janitors series, it's a 5-book series, and obviously because it's for 12-year-olds, I'm not like killing everyone. Like I'm not killing off the kids.
It's a heck of a series, you guy. The Janitor. It's got called that because they clean up normal things.
Yeah, well, that's actually fairly accurate, but
it's a lovely adventure.
Yeah, in the series, like I did have to find a way, because I wasn't killing them off. I had to find a way to be creative about how to eliminate them from future books. So like in one book, that character was gone for summer camp or whatever, right? And didn't really feature into that book. Maybe had like a cameo at the end, came in clutch and saved the day for a minute. And you almost forgot they were there because they hadn't been in for the whole book. Or one character goes missing and they're trying to find him for the whole book. Because you either have to kill them or you have to remove them from the story, or else you have, what, like you were saying, David, you end up with this snowball effect, and it's an unruly mess of a cast that you can't deal with.
Which, I mean, it's having such a large group is, I mean, it's great to have it as long as it's manageable, because if you have so many different characters and identities and backgrounds, it's fun to just mash them together and see how they bounce off each other. But that's fun when you have like a manageable amount. 2 characters getting to interact on adventure is fun. 2 characters interacting while 6 other people are standing around twiddling their thumbs ends up feeling like you're wasting like everyone's time, and it's like, what's going on? Usually you can sort of pull it off if you have a really strict point of views, but it's still, you have that danger of just things getting unwieldy. But yeah, and that's I've got 20 books all in the same world, but that was one of the benefits of them being, the Shadow Dance is this 6, Paladins is this 4, Half Orcs is this 8, all with different focuses, so that characters that were main characters in one would just be cameos in a different one. So I could kind of have a nice, clear, definitive, like, these are what this book's about. This trilogy has these characters, and you'll see them, but we're not about them. We're about this group.
Yeah, great. Anything else on that, David, before we move on?
We can move on.
Okay, we've got this one here. Have either of you ever written a chapter or a part and later gone back and realized that you don't remember any of it? Yeah, I do a lot of my writing in the middle of the night. I like to write from like 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. One time I was on deadline for book, at the end of book 2, I'm like writing out this ending, and all of a sudden in the morning I read it, and like one of the characters says something incredibly profound. So profound, in fact, I didn't even know what it meant. And I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do here? Because this doesn't, like, I don't even know what this means. And then it forced me, because I'd already submitted it, it forced me to really think about
what does this mean?
Yeah, and actually that's like a large part of what shaped book 3 was this really cryptic line that was spoken at the end of book 2 when I was like really tired and I just was trying to get this finished and turned it in, and now it's like it like wraps up the entire trilogy based on this one cryptic line written from the shadowy parts of my brain in the middle of the night.
I've written at this point like 27, 28, something like that, 28 books over the course of like 10 years. There are huge chunks I don't remember anything about, and I will get every now and then someone will send me a message, be like, hey, why did you have this and this character do? And it'll be like some vague thing. Why did this character attack this person? I'll just be like, I don't even know what book they're talking about. All right, how do I ask for more information without revealing that I don't remember hardly anything of anything I've written, trying to like continue on a book 6 of a series or book 8 of a series and be like, I can barely remember what I did in book 1. So I'm just going to desperately hope everyone still thinks I know what I'm doing, which is basically the entire arc of my career. Like just keep faking it, and everyone's just distracted by the explosion, fireballs, and the bloodshed. Maybe no one will notice.
I'm glad to hear that because I had a similar experience one time where I was doing this book signing, and this kid comes up, and he's got a book, one of my kids' books, and I asked him if he liked it. He said, yes, I love it. I've read the whole series like a couple of times or whatever. And so I'm signing this book to him, and he tells me his name, and I'm putting his name in it. And then he's like, and I see his name, and I say, hey, did you like that? I remember that there was a character with his name in the book. So I'm like, did you like the fact that like you have an unusual name, but I used that, like that was the main character in the book? And he's just staring at me like, what are you talking about? And anyway, I have this whole conversation where I'm like, oh man, kid, maybe you didn't read the book, right? And I give it to him, he walks away, and I like sign a couple more books, and then I remember I cut that character completely out of the book. Like that, he went, and so the kid probably goes and gets in the car and is like, Mom, I don't know, that was a weird author. Like he didn't even know what he was talking about.
That's what it was like having conversations with my editor, Breed, with Soulkeeper in particular. I ended up cutting like 25,000 words and writing a new 30,000. We rearranged chapters. So by the end of it, I'm doing edit notes now. Just be like, I don't remember if this happened in the cut version or it's in the book anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to trust you guys to know at this point, because I've got like 7 versions of the book in my head, and I don't know which one is the one that's currently gone live.
Totally. Oh, that's funny. Let's see. We've got another one here. David, we've got one for you. How has your experiences between self-publishing and traditional publishing been similar and different?
There we go. All right. They are, in terms of how, pretty much everything. It's hard to be like everything, because that tells you nothing. In many ways, it is a lot easier and more relaxing, because I don't have to worry about the cover. I don't have to try to find an editor. I don't have to hire the editor, pay the editor. I don't have to worry about most of the promotion. Obviously I have to do some, but it's not quite the same. I am not, doing Facebook ads and stuff like that. Orbit's doing that. I mean, there's so much that I can just offload onto Orbit and be like, I'm going to focus on telling the story. And it also helps that I have, like, my editors I've worked with, Devi and Breed, are the best editors in the world. I mean, I am insanely privileged to be able to work with people that can help me craft a story. Whereas when I'm self-publishing, it's generally me. But when self-publishing, I have a lot more freedom to just be like, I'm doing what I feel like, especially with like the Half Orcs, which is basically a super long Dungeons and Dragons adventure, is what it boils down to. So the cover is exactly what I want. The editorial decisions I have the final say, whereas with Orbit is way more joint, if not Breet, getting the final say, which I'm usually fine with, because if I'm uncertain about something, it's great to be able to be like, hey, Breet, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Where if you're self-published, there is no one to tell you what to do. And the people that are trying to tell you what to do are often trying to just make money off of you. So my pace has certainly slowed down as well. I write way slower traditional now. It is not quite the same level of write or die and vanish with self-publishing, where I burned out like just really badly. I cranked out like 15 books in 3 years and then just crashed and barely wrote anything for like 9 months. And it was awful. So I definitely don't miss that either. I don't know if that really answers anything about your question, but yeah, I'm part of a team versus self-publishing is all me winging it. I guess the best way to describe it.
Man, I can't imagine the self-publishing, all the work that goes into that.
It's a business. If you don't approach
sure.
it like a business, you're going to have horrible problems unless you just get incredibly lucky, which happens. But
yeah, that would be me, because I am very creative minded, but not very business minded. I would fail miserably. Looks like there's a question here. Tyler, how has your experiences between writing and publishing adult fantasy and YA or middle grade fantasy been similar and different? The biggest thing is like, I feel like I try really hard to, I try not to dumb down my middle grade stuff, too much, but there is a nice level of no holds barred that you can do with adult fantasy.
mm-hmm.
And I'm not just saying like more graphic violence. I'm also saying like complexity, right? Like the complexity of a magic system. Mm-hmm. You're able to just dive so deep into that. Whereas I do have fairly complex magic systems that build over the course of a series with my middle grade stuff. But it has to, I don't know, it's just different the way I handle the magic system and the complexity of the story more than anything. Mm-hmm. other than that, I try to keep the humor similar. I've found, I don't know, I'm just like a big kid, so like that's why I started writing middle grade stuff, is because I could tell jokes that made 12-year-olds laugh. And Arder Ben in the series, he tells those same jokes. Like, like
there's obviously some brutal stuff in it, but there's a lighthearted tone to the Arder Ben in those books it was very appealing. It was just like, hey, all right, we're here for some fun. That was like the feeling I got within like the first couple chapters. I think that was part of like a cut blurb attempt I made that was can you tweak this when I sent it? But it basically was something to the extent of you can tell you're in for a good time, for a fun little romp within like the first 2 chapters. I mean, it's just obvious that that's what this is going for. You were not going to shock me with the violence and whatnot. It was like, no, you're here to have a good time. And I did have a good time. It was great.
Well, thank you, David. That's super nice.
You're almost welcome.
Another question here for you, David. Did you continue to write? Did you continue writing fantasy books in the next year?
I'm not sure what this question is. Did I continue writing fantasy books in next? I mean, I'm going to be writing fantasy books for hopefully years to come. Like the Vagrant Gods trilogy is very much fantasy. Main characters, a assassin dual wielding swords with a skull mask and a silver crown, and hooded and cloaked. I mean, it's as fantasy as it gets. I doubt I'll be doing any, like, if I do any sort of like sci-fi or anything like that, that would be most likely a self-published one-off that I do just to see, would be my guess.
Yeah, cool. The follow-up part of that was for me here. Have you out another book with the same story? So I just have, so far, the only standalone book I've written was that Magic's Most Wanted book coming up in January. Other than that, I have written, 3 in the Arder Ben, in the Kingdom of Grit trilogy, 3 stories, kind of all part of a bigger one. And then my other series kind of all taking place within. So I guess I've had the chance to create a world for my Janitor series, a world for my Wishmakers series, the world for my Kingdom of Grit series, and then just a one-off with the Magic's Most Wanted. So whereas David, you mentioned that all 20 books are in the same universe.
I had 20 books, it was like 20 novels that were all set in the same universe, roughly the same time, barring one trilogy that took place hundreds of years before. And it wasn't until the second trilogy with Orbit with the Seraphim that I branched out into a even slightly different world than like the standard orcs, elves, D&D type setup, which I was terrifying the first time going in, be like, okay, no, it's all new, all from scratch. Oh, this is scary.
Yeah, for sure. All right, moving on to the next one.
Actually, let's see. We've got some of a. How would you both of you feel if you did a crossover series, including the characters from the Keepers of the Arder Ben trilogy? Have you done any co-authorship before, out of curiosity?
I never have. No. Have you? You have.
I have, with the Breaking World trilogy, with Rob Duper. We were both self-published, and he had read all my stuff, and he was who I bounced ideas off of after a while, and eventually. He mentioned to me once, like, "Oh, you've done all this stuff, but your world creation stuff, I would love to just sink my teeth into and basically world build better than I had done it so far." Because I was just like always like, "Oh, it's hundreds of years ago. Here's a vague reference here or there." And he was like, "I was like, well, do you want to like co-write it?" He's like, and then like the next day, I got like 3 pages worth of like ideas and outlines. So I was like, "I'll take that as a yes," and then we just pitched it. I don't know. Arder would probably be a lot of fun to write. I think of all of your characters, I think the lighthearted manner and jokiness of them, I would probably be able to do best.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that your magic, like the chaotic nature of your combat scenes and your and your like the magic revival, I think would just blow Ard's mind. Like here he is, like he learns about like one little piece of magic, and he's just like, this is the craziest thing. And I think if he were to step into the Keeper's world and with all the monsters coming alive as they are, I think he would just be like, what do I?
Well, the fun thing is that would actually work really well because that was like the point of like half the characters. I mean, I had one of the characters is really just this guy that was just like a bookworm that had all this ancient lore that didn't mean anything, but they were spells, and then like tried it out and cast a fireball at these zombies that were outside his tower and was like, oh crap, these actually do things. And then was like, by the time the main character arrives, he's like pouring through every book and taking notes and like, all right, I think this will summon an ice storm to blow everything up, but I don't know yet. And that one I think turns people into a sheep. I haven't tested it yet. And the main character's like, you're not going to test it because what if you can't unsheep them?
Yeah.
This is when you get to be, you can't sheep someone if you can't definitively unsheep them. And these are the questions that my characters get to debate because I delve with deep themes.
Yeah. And Art or Ben would probably be looking for a bakery. Do you have bakery?
I am terrible when it comes to food, so no, I probably don't. Every food instance I have to describe is torture, as I'm like, oh crap, what do people eat back then? I don't know.
No, right on. All right, let's see what else we got here. You want to pick another one, David?
What we got here? We got what's your best for new authors who are trying to find their style, genre, target audience for writing? Have you written so many unpublished stories that you're able to narrow it down? For example, how did you find out you liked writing novels for children before your current series? So
that's a good question.
You want to start with that?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. This is I'm rereading the question just so I make sure I get it all. And you're actually onto something. It looks like submitted by Jake. I feel like Jake's onto something here because in my opinion, one of the great mistakes that many new authors, new writers experience is that they don't have a clearly defined genre or target audience. Mm-hmm. And so you end up with this weird like hybrid thing where it's kind of like it's like a middle grade book, but it has like adult content in it, or it's in a mm-hmm. it's just this, it's kind of this book that the audience was you as the writer, and you wrote exactly what you wanted, which is good, and you should to a large extent do that. I mean, you don't want to chase trends, you don't want to try to write what's popular out there, but at the same time, clearly knowing in your mind who is this for. Stephen King, in his book on writing, he talks about having an IR, which he mm-hmm. refers to as the ideal reader. Mm-hmm. So he says you pick someone in your mind who is the ideal reader for this book, and I believe in that book he talks about how it's his wife is his IR.
Yes, it is.
And he talks about how when he writes a scene that's just disgusting, he writes it with her in mind, so that her skin is crawling and she's hating every second that she's reading. When he writes a scene that's happy, he imagines her smiling. And anyway, so to some extent, like it is helpful to find an ideal reader and then write it to them, because as ourselves, like we can easily become our own ideal readers, but we kind of have weird styles sometimes, and it might not be as appealing to a large market. And so I think it does help to find someone else out there. And so like, for a long time, my nieces and nephews, they were kind of my ideal readers for my kids' stuff. And I would write a scene and I'd be like, oh, they're going to really like this part, and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it is usually younger writers and writers who are just starting out that are a lot more worried about their style. I think there's this belief that until you have like this definitive style down, you won't like stand out or you won't make it. And like your style is just who you become over time. And it's going to merge from everything you write, and just as important, it's going to emerge from everything you read. What you read and what you enjoy is going to likely be what you yourself create, because you're often writing for yourself. So it's less about like, I am this style or I am this type of writer, and more of just you should have a strong voice, like know who you are, be confident in your storytelling, believe that you've got a story to tell, and your readers are going to come along with you. But just keep reading and keep writing, and the style it's just going to be who you are as you write in that particular time. I mean, my style has absolutely changed over my career. It would be almost impossible for it not to change. But it was most often it was not always conscious decisions, or I'm going to try to emulate Stephen King now, or wow, Martin's popular, so I'm going to try and copy him. Usually when my style changed, it came because of things like, hey, I want to try to get better at my world building. After 20 knots of like just one same world, I want to stretch out, or I want to try and do something like, I read a Sanderson book and was like, wow, maybe I should try and put more into my magic systems, and that will tweak things. I read The Silmarillion by Tolkien, was like, wow, I should work on my creation myths, and like, so, but yeah, I'm trying to worry about that is like the least thing you should worry about, and more of just, am I creating characters people are going to want to spend time with? Am I keeping the pace up? Am I creating a story that will have readers invested in it? Will they have reason to invest in it? Be it from like shocking things happening or likable characters undergoing trials. Focus on just those storytelling aspects, and the actual, word by word style is just something you will slowly develop and almost certainly get better at over time, because it's almost impossible to not write again and again and again without getting better.
And I feel like David kept touching on like what I consider to be one of the most important things. Like the number of times you said character, right? Like relatable characters, good characters, like everything. It's all about the characters. And really, if you have characters that the audience is invested in, you can put them into any sort of plot. And if you've written great characters, people will be interested in them. But I did like on Jake had a follow-up comment here, question. Have you written so many unpublished stories that you were able to narrow it down to the style that you liked? I definitely wrote stuff that never got published. And I feel like the reason that's, I feel like the reason that's important is because a lot of the time writers, when they write their first novel and they finish their first novel, they feel like they've just written their golden ticket. And they will spend forever trying to get that golden ticket published. When my best advice for new writers is, as soon as you have one story finished and you begin submitting it to agents or to publishers or however you're going about that, you should immediately start on something new. Because when it comes down to it, like my path to publication, I had big interest from my first publisher on this story. And after months and months of interest, they finally said, we're not going to publish this. But I immediately had another book, which turned out to be my Janitors series, which I threw at them. Same day, I was just like, hey, well, if that one didn't work, what about this one? And the fact that I had two stories in my arsenal made it so that I got published when I did.
Like, I know Nicholas Eames has talked about it. His first magnum opus that he was super in love with, he now considers terrible. And like Kings of the Wild was the follow-up he wrote while submitting that one. That is actually incredibly common. The amount of times you hear about like people that will write this novel and then edit it and edit it and edit it for like 10 years. Like you'll hear agents talk about how like they'll see the same novel being shopped by the same author and they won't have written anything else over like a decade, but they just keep convinced that if they craft the cover letter or the pitch slightly differently, and it's like, it's always better to just write the next one. Like almost always better. Like obviously put the work into get that first one as good as it can get, but it is a rare occurrence that you have I worked on this for 20 years and produced this superbly chiseled masterpiece for the world. And that's usually not how it works. And if you are determined to be that huge cultural milestone, I mean, I wish you luck. You're trying to be a 1 in a million. And that's a 1 in a million. Good luck. I don't know how else to say it. You're so much better off with. I always viewed it as a lotto ticket. If submitting your book into the publishing world is like buying a lottery ticket, and the best way to increase your odds is not to research numbers, it's to buy as many lotto tickets as possible. I mean, and just the more books you have out there, theoretically, the more that might sell. I mean, that might be like cynical and jaded. I don't know. I mean, I'm the old fogey now doing this for 10 years. As me, also others have been at this for like 30 or 40 or look at me like, you don't know cynical and jaded yet.
Yeah. Do you want to grab another question for us, David? I can too, either.
If your books were adapted into a different medium, live action, film, TV, animated series, graphic novel, video game, etc., what would you like to see it as? Now you have to do both.
I was going to say, I'm going to guess David's going to be video game.
Probably, but maybe not.
Yeah. Okay.
Answer for yours though, both kids and Arter.
Okay. So I would say if I could do my middle grade series, I would want to see it as an animated series. I feel like there's so many little side stories that could spin off what was happening in those books that would be really fun as an animated. But Arter Ben, I've been tinkering with a homebrew D&D campaign that takes place in the Kingdom of Grit world, where essentially spell casting is completely replaced with grit, and each grit bomb has an effect, an area effect, and things like that. So I do think a tabletop game would be really fun, but I feel like that's also kind of like coming in low. Like if I could choose between a live action film and a tabletop game,
sure.
I'm gonna choose the film.
Yeah, like for it, that would be like, can I get the advertisement of a massive film deal? I mean, or an HBO series?
Right. And I would say if I could cast anyone as Arter Ben, I would probably cast Chris Pratt.
I can see it.
Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Here's the thing. For most of my stuff, given that I have super over-the-top combat that is most likely not replicatable in the real world in any way, shape, or form, I would actually love a freaking anime, like a Japanese anime of like either Seraphim or any of them. Like Shadow Dance would be perfect, just for the over-the-top violence and swordplay and people leaping from the rooftops. And like I once had someone try to ask if they could how to replicate the main character's cloak dance fighting style. And he told me that he tried to do it. And I was just like, oh, no, it doesn't work in the real world. I just make it seem like it when I write. And I do it well enough and move fast enough that you don't think about it. It's like, it's supposed to look cool. No. But he tried really hard. It involved like spinning and like flinging the cloak about to hide movements of hands and legs. And then poor guy, I loved him to death, but oh my gosh, no. And for Soulkeeper, like I'd take an HBO series. Oh my gosh, give me that advertisement in a heartbeat. They could recast every character of mine, botch it all, and all that would mean is I would get to be the cranky man on Twitter being like, my vision was clearly superior. Now go buy the book, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'll take those sales. Plus, I would, to be completely honest, if I saw comic, video game, any adaptation whatsoever of my work, I would geek out like mad and probably lose my mind and shove it in front of anyone who would listen to me, because it would be absurdly cool and I would die to see it. So
okay,
what we got here?
Let's see, to both of us, when you write the first draft with your book, did you read the first draft to make corrections about your story? Good question. Yeah, like you never stop reading it. I feel like you read it until you're so sick of it that you don't want to see it again. You constantly tweaking, changing things, adding things, removing things, putting the things back in that you removed before. And it just goes on and on and on until finally you give it over to your editor. They read it, and then the process starts again. They send it back to you, and you just have to, and then as you get into the later
do you
draft.
Keep a little file of like deleted content?
I do, yeah.
It gets used, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it does. It totally does.
Yeah. What generally will happen is I'm going to read specific chapters dozens of times, especially if they're key chapters. I'm usually, especially the more later in my career, the more likely I'm willing to write out of order instead of just like start to finish plot. I've actually started to jump around more and more, move chapters and events and timelines around more and more. So like trying to keep everything together. Yeah, you have to read multiple times and like just try to get a feeling for where the book is going to end at. And then you get like editorial and like you end up cutting scenes, adding things. And yeah, by the time you're done with the novel, you're like, I don't want to look at it anymore. I don't want to see it. I don't want to touch it. I am done with everything involved with this book because I have tried my hardest to make it the best. And you just kind of eventually, that's when it's time to like send it to the editor and just be like, it's there. It's ready. And then rely on your editor to know if like, hey, I know you think it's ready, but maybe this isn't. And then you just desperately hope and pray that's not the case. And if it does, you cry a little and then you get back to it.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see how. Okay, we got another question here. What are the most challenging and most fun parts of writing an adult fantasy trilogy? Would you like to write a standalone fantasy novel, or do you prefer writing longer series? The man with the long series can answer that first.
For me, easily the most challenging part of writing fantasy trilogy, standalone series, doesn't matter. It's always the same. And I always struggle with this so much. And it's at the start of a brand new series, brand new world, introducing all of the characters that I'm going to be maneuvering around. So much of my stories are based around the drama and like the emotions and the conflicts of the various characters and their conflicting wants. And it's hard. You can't do that until you have that cast, until you have, if I have two brothers that are in conflict, until you know both of the brothers, it's not going to hook you when I try and get into their conflict. So trying to get all the characters introduced and get you to care about them, because that's one of the other tough things. Just because I introduce your character doesn't mean you care about them yet. I need to often, get them into a few challenges, get them introducing other, people, get them to either save someone or be in trouble or show some humanity when they seem like they're like the hard-edged assassin or whatever it is. And then, so usually what ends up happening is like my second book is almost always better than the first book in everything I write, which is always maddening. And I've always tried to do better each and every time, but it keeps happening. And then just the further you go on, for me, it often becomes easier because I get to keep building on a cast I already know and love. Then the difficulty switches to, how do I keep upping the stakes? How do I keep the tension going? If you threaten to blow up the world in book one, you're going to have a hard time topping that in book two and book three, unless you start blowing up multiple worlds. I mean, there's learning to pace myself compared to some of my other series has also been a deal with that. But you've certainly dealt with that going from, you're young adult to, Art or Ben. So
yeah, and I completely agree with you. I feel like you said it perfectly. Like, finding a way to elevate the stakes each time it has to happen throughout a series, and that often is one of the most challenging parts of a series, in my opinion. I try to innovate the magic system as well, for every book, so that you think you understand the magic system. In the Kingdom of Grit trilogy, in every book there should be I have intended for there to be a mind-bending reveal that changes what all of the people in the world think they know about the world, and therefore what the reader thought they understood about this world for 700 pages, all of a sudden they learn something that really changes the way that they view the world, which sets up the next installment. And then there's another similar reveal at the end of book two, which kind of everything that you thought you understood is different than it was. And then a third one. In the third book, I tried to put that reveal a little bit earlier in the story so that there could be resolution.
Yeah, and I try and do like similar reveals, or like the identity of a villain, something like that. But eventually, especially with something like a series, you can't. And if you keep going, I mean, you can see a lot of popular fiction, a lot of stuff, especially stuff that goes for like 20, 30 years, especially you start looking into comic books and whatnot. Eventually you run that danger of pulling the rug out from someone so many times, they just don't even trust you anymore.
Yeah.
Or nothing feels concrete. Because the rules, if the rules for the magic system keep changing and weren't properly foreshadowed in book one and then book two, by the time you get to book three and everything's changed, that only matters if you were consistent and properly foreshadowed it.
Absolutely.
Say if you try and do a big reveal of, people that were born on a Tuesday can actually cast magic in book three, people are going to be like, well, A, is that actually, just because it's a surprise, does that mean it's good? Just because you surprise someone or it's a twist doesn't mean it's good. And B, did you foreshadow it? Does that fit? Does that add anything? And
right, like you definitely, like Deus Ex Machina, right? Like you have to, God is in the machine or whatever, that it's going to come through and something miraculous will happen. that's very different than innovating on your magic system with foreshadowing and the proper foundation. Because I am with you on that, Dave. There's nothing more frustrating than thinking that you understood something and then have it be like, ha, just kidding, you actually didn't know anything, right? Like they're like that, and hopefully my trilogy doesn't read that way, because I had that plot twist planned from the beginning and was trying to establish it.
When like a show or a book or a movie does that, the immediate thing that I will do as a reader, and then that most people will do, I mean, you can look at, say, I don't know, The Sixth Sense, for example, is one of the most famous of all. Yeah. The first thing you do when that happens is you then go backwards. You immediately think back to, oh, what does this change? What does this mean? How did this? And a good thing like that will have you go back and go, oh, all these things now that were weird suddenly make sense. Or these offhand comments. If you want to read someone that's just beyond a master of it at this point, Megan O'Keefe's Velocity Weapon is just like there's a new one like every 3 chapters, and it's absurd how good she is at it. Where it makes the story feel bigger and makes you feel like, oh my gosh, if I was just paying a little bit more attention, I might have caught this coming or seen that coming, or like, oh, this reveal makes all of these previous actions even more horrific when I just wasn't sure. Like that's the goal, not looking backwards and being like, oh, this actually doesn't change anything.
Right. Or, I feel like you want the reader to say, how did I miss that? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, because it was so well foreshadowed. Like, how did we miss it? Mm-hmm. We got 2 or 3 questions left in about 4 minutes. So.
You want to address the pandemic?
Has the pandemic changed your life as writers at all, or the subjects you're writing about? So I haven't been writing a ton. I've been waiting for books to come out. I mean, I had the re-release of book 1 in October, book 2 released in November, book 3 released today, and then next month I have another book coming out. So honestly, I haven't been writing as much as I have just been getting ready for all of my years worth of work to finally hit shelves.
Your barrage.
Yeah, but as a writer, I mean, you work from home anyway, and I don't know, don't go out much. I work a lot I live in the western US in Utah, and I live in the mountains, pretty close to the mountains. So I often throw a backpack on and take a hammock, and I hike up deep into the mountains and string my hammock up and write. Not now, because it's, in the 20 degrees or whatever out there right now, but in the nicer months. So I still, I didn't feel like I had to change much of that.
It's in terms of affecting how I write, it just more results in occasional like, oh, that's weird. I mean, I have a chapter opening with the characters telling other characters masks on, and suddenly that feels like entirely different. These are supposed to be their big scary identity hiding mask, and now I'm just like, no, these are just regular face masks. Now for me, I'm lucky enough that this is my full-time job, so it doesn't really directly affect that. But like, my poor wife is now homeschooling our 3 kids, so like technically it's noisier and more chaotic, but I've got noise canceling headphones, and my wife is amazing and will generally be schooling the kids when I'm trying to write. So that's really the biggest change. Other than that, it's just, being cramped up in the house with your family for months and months at a time does not exactly make it the most conducive writing environment. And I'm sure my characters have gotten crankier than they might normally be because of it. But like I said, I'm thankfully pretty lucky and blessed with my situation to be able to keep overall writing and cranking out these books mostly unchanged.
That's great. Looks like we got one more question and just a couple of minutes to answer it. So good on timing. What are you both reading or watching now that you're enjoying?
This sounds like a great one to end on. So
fun one.
All right, what do you want? Do you want to end this, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can go first.
All right, go first.
So I'm rereading Dune. I haven't read it in a long time, and I'm just kind of slowly working my way through it. I read it in high school, and really been surprised at how much I've enjoyed it again all these years later.
That was one of those books that I read and was like, oh, I need to try so much harder on my world building.
yeah, it's just incredible. It's really that's been really fun to read. I haven't actually been watching much lately, but one of my favorites is the Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance, the Netflix series that just came out like last October. Because I was the world building in that show. I mean, the puppeteering is beautiful. The lighting, the music is all gorgeous. The storytelling is incredible. But the world building is like, typically you don't get world building that complex and that amazing unless it is built on a book series. And so I've really enjoyed and rewatched that series on Netflix a couple of times.
I am, now to hope I don't butcher the name, I am currently reading Essa Henson's Nothic Gloss, which I got lucky enough. I finally got it arrived. I begged for it like a month ago, and it got lost in the mail, and then a new copy arrived. So I've been trying to get back into reading that. Thanksgiving kind of threw that off, but no, that's my current read. Not really watching anything right now. I watch way more because I am a gaming nerd. I watch more Twitch and YouTube than anything else. So I'm currently watching like a streamer called Bear Taffy play Hades most of the time with my wife as we wind down for the night. That's my wind down thing. But yeah, Nothic Gloss. Hey, there's the link is in the chat for those who are interested. I can heartily recommend it. It is wonderful sci-fi, and it opens up bloody and gruesome and just hilariously surprising by chapter 2. Other than that, glad to have you help me out here, Tyler, and hang out with me.
Yeah.
It was basically my first real live event. So I apologize if I rambled.
You didn't have to leave your house.
I didn't. There is that. So if like there's no me, like if I had to run and puke from nervousness, the bathroom's right there. It's just turn off the camera. No one will know. But seriously, thank you for everyone who watched. I'm gonna let you outro finally.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for all the questions that came in, and happy reading. And to those of you that are writing, keep on writing, and don't give up on it, and keep working on creating good content, because that's what the world needs right now, is good creative stuff. So thank you all.
Bye.